I grew up in a great home with a dad who's a saint and a mom who's not far behind. And they didn't know a lot of the things that happened to me when I was growing up. But for years in my life, I got abused. Not by somebody in my family, but by other people. There were multiple people outside of my family. And it happened at 2 different times in my life. So there are some people here who were sexually abused when they were children, and those of us who went through that, you know what that's like. Those of us who didn't go through that, you don't have a clue what that does. But that was me. So I had years intermittently of being abused, all of which summed up to give me an estimation of myself that went something like this. I'm useless. I don't matter. I'm disposable. I'm discardable. No one cares. I'm not worth defending. I'm not worth protecting. Because the young boys, or the 52-year-old, even now, when the enemy tries to play with this, the 52-year-old mind knows, if my dad knew, my dad would have done something. But the young boy's brain doesn't know that. The young boy's brain is inside screaming out, why isn't anybody doing anything right now? That's what was going on in my life. You would never have guessed that from knowing me when I was in my 20s and my 30s, or my 40s, because I didn't want you to know. And because I am the way I am, I tried to live a particular way of life, and the result of living the particular way of life or doing the things that I would do gave off the impression of being aloof, arrogant, and superior, when in fact, those were the 3 words that never would have come into my mind. What came into my mind was useless and unworthy. Then, of course, you add on to that my cooperation with sin. So it's not like I was just somebody who was used. Father Pierre talked about these entryways of the enemy. Trauma, which is what we've all experienced more or less in here in some way or another. Trauma was my life. And the enemy used as an opportunity to play on, and he played on it. And so that gave me, in my own mind, permission to do a whole set of things with my life. And so I just started to add sin after sin after sin after sin. I'm already damaged goods, who cares? And so the enemy just had fertile ground to till and to plant things in. So remember the enemy's name, one of his names is Satan. Satan means the accuser, and so he was accusing me. He was telling me, you're worthless. He was accusing God, saying he's not a good father, or that wouldn't have happened to you. And he was accusing all of you. You don't care. And you want to hurt me too. So I don't know about you, but here's what got into me. Abandonment, the sense of rejection, betrayal, an orphan spirit, fatherlessness, even though I had a great father. But he wasn't doing anything for me because he didn't know anything was happening. Abuse, anger. You should have seen my anger before God got a hold of me. Fear, insecurity. Here's one of the most perverse things from all this: perfectionism and self-justification. Kind of a sense of, I got to find a way to measure up now, because I'm obviously not worth much. Sadness. Almost monthly, I have the experience of looking into cavern of depression. And the Lord saying to me, you don't have to go in there. Just take my hand. You don't have to go in there. But it's omnipresent still for me. Sexual distortion, shame, unforgiveness, a victim spirit, and worthlessness. I had all those. That's what got into me. That's at a quick glance. So I don't know what you've got checked off, but I've got a bunch of them checked off. So a set of years ago, I had a chance to go through Unbound the first time, and I can't tell you how powerful it was. So we were bringing it here for the first time, and I had a chance to connect with John before the opening night. At that time, we did it as a Friday night and a Saturday conference, and so we were going to start Friday night, and so I met with John in the afternoon. I expected it to be somewhat, powerful. I didn't expect to go through several boxes of Kleenex. So people will tell you, physicians in here will tell you that there's chemically two different kinds of tears. There's the kinds of tears that you cry when you pinch your thumb in the door, and then there's the kind of tears you cry when you get abused. They're different chemically. One has water and salt in them. The other has water, salt, and acid in them. That's why crying is so important. Gets the acid out. Well, man, did I have a lot of acid. After 20 years of being a priest. And so John just prayed with me for some time, and it was remarkably healing. And there's a lot left to do, trust me. But there was one image in a particular way which was just a huge, powerful image for me. And so he asked me at one point, he says, do you see anything? And I told him what he saw, or what I saw. And then he says, let me tell you what I see. And I said, okay. And he says, I see a young boy, about the age that I would have been when I started to get abused, standing at a doorway, a screen door, looking outside into a backyard. And he says, and I see a young girl on the outside of the doorway. And he says, I think the young girl is, and I said, Therese, isn't it? And he said, what? I said, St. Therese, isn't it? And he says, I think it is, actually. I used to hate St. Therese. I won't tell you why. I love St. Therese now, but she had a particular devotion to priests. That wasn't because she thought so much of priests. That was because she hung around them, and she knew how many prayers they needed. So that's why Therese prays for priests. She knows who we are. So anyway, I had been spending that summer just immersing myself in Therese. And so he says, I see this young girl, it's Therese, she's standing outside the door, and she kind of pushes the door open, takes the young boy, takes my hand, walks outside, and in the backyard is this tremendous figure. Just sitting there in the backyard. He's both strong and endearing and joyful and magnanimous, everything all at once. And she points and she says, that's your father, and you're safe here. And something just shattered in me. Because I realized, and mindful, this is still, I've been ordained for 20 years or so at this time. Even as a priest, so much of my life had been something like trying to fashion something, out of my life, my work, whatever. Things I would do in ministry, anything. Just make something, give it to God, and go, is this good enough? Am I okay now? Do I measure up? Are you pleased? Because so much of what had happened in my early life had given me an understanding of myself that I had to earn love because I felt so unloved. Does that make sense? Anybody here relate to that? Here's the good news of the gospel. Jesus dies for the ungodly. Jesus dies for the ungodly. All of us. Wasn't a reward. It's the way home. And all of a sudden, all these things that I had tried to amass of my life, this attempt to win approval, to measure up, to be good enough, to win the Cupid doll, it just melted away. So in a way that I had heard in my head, but in a way that I had never really experienced in my life before, I came to know that my identity is simply this: son or daughter. And that's all that matters.